Hello and welcome. Another edition of the Corvive College Coaches Corner. And I'm really excited because I get to talk to a buddy, a pal, a friend, not only within the sport, but life in general. You may recognize the voice with regard to college baseball. Also, if you happen to live on the West Coast, maybe the California, Anaheim, Los Angeles Angels head coach at Hastings College in Hastings, Nebraska, Victor Rojas. Coach, I want to say thank you. I know it's a busy time of year, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
No, always a pleasure, Walter. Love talking baseball with you.
Well, one of the things I want to kick right off, because I get this question every single day after talking with parents, NAIA baseball, 4-year school. It's been around an awful long time. It's not anything new, but it's new by the way of becoming a more recognized path for high school athletes. Let's talk a little bit about, you were involved with Ottawa over in Arizona and now as a head coach at Hastings. Tell us a few things about NAIA baseball that get you excited as not only a coach, but as a parent as well.
Well, I'm a guy that I went to the JUCO route and NAIA route myself many moons ago in the late 80s. I was fortunate enough to play at College of the Desert in Palm Desert, and then ultimately ended up at Lewis Clark State under Ed Sheff and got a chance to play for him in 1990. So I've always been a fan of NAIA. I've always been a fan of just getting on the field and playing and getting opportunity to play. And truth be told, I think that's what everybody should be pitching as far as NAIA is concerned. It is an opportunity. We've not all schools, but most schools, Hastings included, have stackable scholarships, academic and athletic money to offset the tuition cost. It's really good competition. It continues to grow, and I think the light is being shined on it a little bit more so over the last couple of years, primarily because of everything that's happening at the NCAA Division I level and the settlement and the roster crunch that's going to be coming up here on December 1st, where D1 schools have to be at 34. And when you lop off that number, whatever that number is, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, where are those guys going to go? And the options are pretty much redshirting, medical redshirt, or they end up some of those guys are done for baseball completely. They're tapping out, and then guys that are still are younger and have some JUCO eligibility are going to go down to the JUCOs, a D2, a D3, or NAIA. And I think that's why you see the high tide raising all of these boats, where the competition is getting better and better. I think NAIA had 6, 7 guys drafted this year. And obviously a lot of those guys are D1 bounce backs, meaning they had dipped their toe in that D1 pool and ended up playing at the NAIA level. And so I was told a long time ago, if you're good, they'll find you. And really, that's ultimately what it boils down to, is finding a way to get on the field, finding a connection with a coach, a program where you can flourish, not get so geeked up about, what may or may not come down the pike, not worried about the result, worry about the process. And if you worry about that and getting on the field, well, then NAIA Division II, JUCO for some is probably the best route for you.
So a little bit about the NAIA that a lot of families can't seem to wrap their minds around is that the recruiting dynamic is less stringent. There's not as many rules, and you don't have to wait until double secret probation ends and quiet and dead and all this other words. Talk a little bit about, you have the ability to actually work guys out. They can participate in a practice. I mean, there's a lot of things that NAIA really makes for a great experience when you're trying to make that transition from high school to college. Talk a little bit about some of those dynamics from a recruiting perspective.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, it's beautiful to be able to just go ahead and execute a phone call, a text message, a DM to a potential student athlete at any point, not have to worry about where are we on the calendar. So I think that obviously helps tremendously in reaching out. It's not, I know there's the dead periods for Division I and IIs, and it's not as if I got those dates marked on my calendar and I'm going to go specifically go after and channel certain guys because of that. I just go find the guys that I think would be of benefit to our program. And that's kind of how I have approached it. It is unique that we get guys that want to come and work out with us. They can come and practice with us. We get kids all the time when they're coming to admissions and taking their tour and meeting with an academic advisor, as well as meeting with us, asking us, hey, do you need me to throw a bullpen, or do you want to see me swing the bat? And it's totally up to them if they want to do that. It's unique because it doesn't happen all that often. The cool thing is we had one instance where there was a kid from Northern California who we were already hot on. It was a mutual kind of feeling. And I told him, nah, you don't need to throw a bullpen. And this particular day when they came out with the family to check out the school, we happened to be indoors because of the weather, and we've got 3 tunnels, and the middle tunnel is being used by our guys getting bullpens in. And he told our pitching coach he wanted to throw a pen, and he jumped in there. And I mean, we already love the kid, and I just love the fact that he wanted to go in there and throw his bullpen in front of all the guys that are in there, and kind of leave all the cards on the table. And so it is wonderful to have that as a coach and a tool to be able to offer that to our players to come out and see how you stack up against the talent that we're currently featuring this fall. So it is unique. There's no doubt about it. Not everybody is up for wanting to showcase their ability, but for the most part, the guys we continue to recruit and have signed so far, especially for a class of 26, all seem to want to showcase their abilities not only in front of us but in front of our players.
One of the interesting dynamics that I think is happening all across college baseball, but in particular, Hastings being in Nebraska. So whether I'm on the East Coast in the great state of Massachusetts or the left coast with California, a lot of the stereotypical recruiting boundaries, we're going to take care of business in our backyard, whether that's Nebraska or, Idaho or Wyoming, but you're really recruiting. You're bringing in athletes from all over the country. You have them from Texas, you have them from California, Arizona, New England, the Northeast. Talk a little bit about that. It's happening all across college baseball, not just Hastings, but for you, it's all about bringing in quality people that happen to be quality athletes as well.
Yeah, it's unique in that, when I got the job back in May, the program has kind of been spinning its wheels for about 10 plus years. They had a really good run here under Jim Bovey, who is an NAIA Hall of Famer and still part of the, I believe he's the president of the selection committee still with the NAIA for postseason baseball. And so highly respected. His son plays at AA, Mike Bovey with the Milwaukee Brewers. And so when Jim was here, he's from the area. He really recruited, in his backyard, and he could, and had tremendous success doing that. That hadn't necessarily been the case over the last 10 plus years. And so when I was hired, my goal, one, was I want to bring in guys that are going to help us win a conference championship this coming spring. And two, hopefully shine the light back on Hastings and make it a destination for baseball in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas. I grew up about 4 hours from here, and I had always heard about Hastings and how good of an academic school it was. The 2 schools in Nebraska that I knew about, obviously I knew about the Cornhuskers because they were in the Big 8 back in the day. But Creighton and Hastings were the 2 I always knew back in when I was younger. But for whatever reason, guys just weren't able to recruit locally and or good enough talent to compete at a high level. And so I've continued the process of just exploring every unturned stone, and I don't care where you're at. Like you mentioned, we got 2 guys from Canada, we got guys from Washington, from Oregon, from Nevada, from California, from Nevada, from Texas, multiple guys from Texas now. Just signed 3 kids from Kansas, got a kid from Miami, Florida that's coming up, signed a class of 26 kid, talking to another one there. At the break, we got a kid coming in from Italy, an outfielder. We got a pitcher coming in from Japan. So I don't care where you're at. I mean, talent is talent. And if we can get it here to Nebraska, I'm going to try to, talk them into coming here and giving them the opportunity to compete. That's ultimately what it's all about. And, there's due diligence, right? You have the conversation. Are you seriously interested in coming to the Midwest? That's usually one of the first questions that I have, especially for guys that are in warm weather states. Some guys are willing to go wherever. Others obviously got a small radius and they want to stay closer to home because of the weather. And I get it. Florida kids seem to be the toughest. Even South Georgia kids seem to be the toughest to draw to the Midwest. But it's understandable. I got alumni that are asking me, are you going to be recruiting in your backyard? And my reply to them has been and will continue to be, I can want all I want, but if it's not reciprocated, it's difficult to recruit those kids in your backyard. And when you look at programs in the state of Nebraska, we fall in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range. And by the time you get through all those schools, even just from a Concordia and Doane and Creighton and UNO and Omaha, Lincoln, UN Kearney, there's a number of different schools and options, and not including the JUCOs. And so until we win and until we really do shine the spotlight back on Hastings College in our program, it's a little bit of a challenge to get those kids in your backyard. We did just sign a kid out of Lincoln, so just an hour away, left-handed pitcher for class of 26. So there's a start. But, at the end of the day, I'm not fooled into believing that I could just, market and recruit and, and continuously do this on a year in, year out basis. You got to put W's on the board, and that's ultimately the goal.
One of the questions you just touched on a point, and I'm going to ask you to take your Hastings hat off for a second and put your broadcaster hat back on here and talk a little bit from a scope of what I call a dose of reality here. You mentioned Italy, you mentioned Canada, you mentioned Japan. I try to get parents and student athletes to really begin to understand the bigger picture here with regard to college athletics. I've spoken with a number of college coaches that, this next collective bargaining agreement, they see the major league draft kind of getting reduced from 20 down to 10, if you can believe it or not. But really, there's a massive influx of foreign students that are looking to come into the United States with regard to education, academics, but also the quality of baseball, top to bottom and everybody in between. Talk a little bit about that from a recruiting perspective. You're really on a global basis now more than ever before. Even if we just talk to our neighbors to the north, Canada is sending a lot of great athletes. One look at the Dodgers, you see a lot of foreign players within their lineups. So talk a little bit about that dynamic making its way into college athletics.
Well, I think you have to explore everything. Every school and every program, and I'm only going to speak about the NAIA, has its guardrails, right? Every athletic department is different. Our conference, as a matter of fact, the GPAC, you're not allowed to give full rides, meaning tuition plus room and board. Other conferences can. So we're not all on equal footing when it comes to that. And so I think it ultimately becomes, going out and selling yourself and selling your program, your facilities, your academics. And I think when you add it all up from our perspective, Hastings is an extremely attractive option, from stadium to academics to indoor facilities, to our staff, to our community. It's a huge baseball and softball community, and the stackable scholarship. So I think it's once you wrap your head around that as an athlete and understand where you're at as a student athlete and as a parent. I'm just a couple of years removed from this whole recruiting stuff with my own son, and I think you're starting to see that more and more with parents and kids that are more open to other things, other opportunities, not just in their backyard and not just in a particular division, but just collectively looking at those opportunities and making the best decision for their particular families. As it relates to the international side, there's a ton of talent. There's a ton of talent in Italy. I'm telling you, I've watched a great deal of video from guys in Italy. Now that we've got an Italian connection, he's got even more video. from buddies that want to come to the States. And really, it's about opening up that pipeline. There's no doubt that I've leaned on our two guys from Canada when we were talking to guys from Ontario or from Vancouver. And that way they have a connection with somebody here, and they can explain what their process is like. A little bit easier, from Canada to Nebraska, weather-wise. Italy is a little bit easier. If you start getting down in the Caribbean, it becomes a little bit more difficult. The kids from Venezuela or Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, those become a little bit more difficult, more of a challenge to get up here, one, because of the weather, and then two, because of the financial considerations. And like I said, every program is different. For us, we're capped from an academic or merit perspective at $15,000 for international students. And obviously I've got a cap on what my athletic scholarship can be. And oftentimes it doesn't meet the needs of those families, especially in the Caribbean. So, you hope you can fight through it and find a way. But there's talent to be found at every level, every state, every country. You can find it. You just got to put the time in and do it. It really is. I had no idea what the recruiting thing was going to be like until I jumped into it at Ottawa. And that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to the challenges. At Ottawa and Arizona, we only had athletic money, didn't have academic money. So even more of a challenge, because now you've got a bigger gap to fill between the end number and your scholarship money. So it's a challenge, but I'm having the time of my life because I know what I'm selling. I know what we have. And then the last thing I'll tell you is, and you know me pretty well, it's like, I'm so not a gray area guy. I am as transparent and as open as I could possibly be. What you see is what you get. I've lived in a fishbowl for over 20 years. You can find me on the internet. I think I've done a pretty decent job of building a pretty good reputation, and I'm not going to piss any of that away just to stretch the truth to a kid or a family to get them to sign here. It's just not that important. There are talented players that could play at the varsity collegiate level in every corner of this great world of ours. And our goal is to go out and find the best academic, character, athletic fits for our program, and that's kind of what we do. So we no stone left unturned, a piece of coal. We're hammered to see if we could find that diamond, and I like that. That's the fun part of the job is mining that talent or trying to find that talent, and then getting them to come here and commit to us.
Well, one of the things that obviously from a parent or a student athlete perspective that I want to make sure, very, very, social media now plays a large role, whether we like it or not. And, Coach Rojas is active, as is Hastings College, with regard to the baseball profile on X, formerly known as Twitter. And what I want to ask you, you see a lot of levels of college athletics, particularly during that late spring when you start to do a lot of the broadcasts and you start to do the regional and super regional and so forth. Can you explain to parents, and more importantly, and directly to student athletes, that jump from high school to college? Now, we've asked a lot of coaches about this, but really that talent level from NAIA, JUCO, all the way up to the P4 schools across the country isn't really that big of a gap. Maybe the depth or the number of athletes that have that talent, but really there's not, you can't just roll out of high school and say, okay, I'm going to be good enough to play in college, whether it's Hastings or, LSU. I mean, the talent at the college level is really, really good.
Well, I mean, Walter, there's no doubt about it. I mean, when you are even a 1%er coming out of high school and you're fighting for a roster spot and trying to avoid getting redshirted, that tells you how much talent there is, especially at the P4 level. And so if you are not a 1%er and you're a mere mortal in high school, even though you put up great numbers, while that is great mentally to think about, or you aspire to play at a certain level, you kind of have to do a self-assessment, and you have to understand where you're at and what your level of play is today. Doesn't mean that level of play is going to remain 6 months from now or a year from now or 3 years from now? And that's what I tell all our guys who ask every time we get on a call, they ask, how will you develop me? Well, I don't know. Until I get you on campus and know how you actually move and how your body is going to be when you get here in 12 months or 11 months, I can't tell you what that develops, because my plan today could be completely different for you 12 months from now. And so I think it becomes a self-assessment, both from the parent's perspective and from the player's perspective. And that's why I always just reiterate as much as possible. It's about opportunity. If you're good enough, you're going to get multiple scholarship offers. What is it that is important to you? Is it location? Is it warm weather? Is it the coach? Is it financial? Is it the academic side of things? And all of those variables should go into the decision-making process. And one of the biggest ones, I think, that should always come into play, and maybe my situation is a little bit unique as the head coach and the recruiting coordinator, because we're crafting our program. This is year 0 for us, is what we call it. I'm talking to every recruit that we sign. Like they've got a pipeline to me, the guy, the decision maker, and I'm giving them my honest feedback and where I see them and what to expect if they do come here. You've got to have a connection with the coach. If you don't feel you have a connection to the program, whether it's your recruiting coordinator or the head coach, whatever the case may be, and I know the higher levels, it's difficult to generate that connection with the big guy. But at our level, I think it's an easy thing, and I think it should be demanded, to be perfectly honest with you, by parents and by kids. I'd like to speak to the head coach. If you're not talking to him, how will you ever know what your expectations are of where you're supposed to be going, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, and just diving in and on the word of a recruiting coordinator or an assistant coach. And I think that's a benefit that we bring to the table. And I know a lot of schools do the exact same thing just out of necessity. But I want them to hear from me that this is where we're going. This is the plan. This is what we've done so far to kick off the plan. This is where we're headed. And we're clearly getting buy-in, not only from the guys in our program, but by the guys that we've already signed. I think we're at 13 signees now for class of 26, because I'm trying to fill up our roster with as many dudes as possible, from top to bottom. And so I think it's important for families to really, really zone it in as to those 5 things that are the most important to making a decision. And I've had kids that, make a decision very quickly. I've had kids that have, one kid that we ended up signing out of Tennessee, I didn't think we were going to get him, to be perfectly honest with you. And, I'd periodically every week and a half, 2 weeks, send him a text. Hey, how are you doing? How's the process going for you? But he was bouncing everywhere. He's going to visits and taking pictures and visits, taking pictures. And then, you know what? He was going through his process, and he ultimately called and said, I'm committing to Hastings. And so those are the guys that I really appreciate. I'm not a super patient guy. Like I want to sign guys as quickly as possible, just because I hate having stuff on my desk, right? I want it to be done. But I admire kids and families that go through their process and deciding, in a timely fashion, what feels right for them, so that they don't feel like they were pressed into something or they did something in a hurry. But it's getting more and more difficult especially for high school kids. It's just going to get even more difficult. I mean, if you think about it, well, all the kids are going to hit the portal coming up here in over 3-4 weeks, right? It's just going to happen. And that's why these high school keep getting pushed down. But I think you have to find a connection with the guys that you're planning to go to. But it becomes due diligence on everybody's part.
Last question, Coach, and I know that
Yep.
you have an interesting perspective because your son is a Hastings College student athlete. But can you talk about your opinion on the overall experience that college students should take advantage of today? Meaning, we're so ultra focused and hyper focused on the baseball, but in reality, there's so many aspects and components to the college life, the college experience, the relationships on campus, the relationships in the locker room, the community, etc. I know that you're only there for maybe 7 months now. Talk a little bit about the overall lifestyle at Hastings and why that is really appealing to future athletes. What makes that community so special over and above the baseball?
You know, Walter, it's a great question. It kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, the checklist for parents and for kids. And, you know, some kids, I get it, like the idea of the Division I, not so much from a playing, but they want to go to a bigger school. They want to experience the football and the basketball and the like. And then there's other kids that prefer the smaller, intimate setting that Hastings provides. And then you get the in-betweeners, right? Guys that it doesn't matter to them one way or the other. They just want to go where it's a best fit, whether it's academically or athletically. For us, you know, I grew up in a small town in Kansas, middle America. Well, it was a small town back then. Now Kansas City and Overland Park have just grown immensely. So
Right.
It's no longer small. But this town reminds me, and this is what happened when I first interviewed for this job. It reminds me of where I grew up, middle America, and, you know, Main Street, USA. And that has always been one of the things that has tugged at my heartstrings. I've always said, I'm a Midwest guy through and through. This is where I want to be. The values, everything about it is what I like. Small town, everybody waves to you. People actually stop at the stop signs and wave you through. Everyone says good morning to you when you're walking on the street. It's just an easy place to live. And that's really what it boils down to. Our community is about 25,000 people. About 20 minutes up the road, 25 minutes up the road is Grand Island. They have about 50,000 people. Kearney is about 40 minutes away, about 50,000 people. That is the so-called Tri-City area for us. Then Lincoln's an hour and 15 away. Omaha's 2 hours away. So you have enough to do here, not only in our community, but in Grand Island, Kearney, Lincoln. If you want to go to a football, basketball, volleyball's huge in Nebraska. #1 team in the country, the Lady Cornhuskers. There's plenty enough to do here. And so the other thing too, I tell you is, you know, we're about 1,100 kids as far as enrollment is concerned. We got a beautiful campus. It sits on about 125 acres with rolling hills. I tell kids all the time, it plays bigger than it is because of only having 1,000 to 1,100 in enrollment. But 80% of that number are athletes. And so when you're recruiting high school kids from an assimilation standpoint, it's easy to remind them that, listen, the time management's the toughest challenge for any high school kid transitioning to college, especially as a student athlete. But you're coming to school with like-minded individuals. Majority of the people that are here are going through the exact same thing you are. So you look to your left, to your right, and you feel overwhelmed. Trust me, you are in a tight-knit community that they're feeling the exact same things, and the time crunch until you get your feet under you and those sea legs finally go away. But I think the one thing that really brings it all together is how well our group of guys have come together. You know, when I stepped foot on campus back in May, when I talked to the kids before they left campus, after the hiring, I told the 38, 39 guys, I think it was 40 guys that were planning on returning, that, you know, we're going to turn things around. And granted, there's some seniors that I'm their third guy, and they've heard, you know, we're going to turn things around spiel before. The difference is when I arrived on campus, we had our first meeting on August 13th. I didn't walk in the door by myself. I walked in the door with 26 other dudes that I went out and recruited, 23 of which were JUCO and 4-year transfers. Again, going back to the original mindset of, I want to shock the world and win a conference championship next spring. And so I think that kind of set the tone for our program of, okay, he's not messing around. And once we laid the guardrails down and explained to them what the expectations are from a discipline perspective, everybody was about creating this environment for our guys and what we're planning on doing. And what we've started on August 13th with everybody would look like a West Side Story scenario where you've had the returners over here and the newcomers over here, and it was like everybody's marking their territory, has turned into this unbelievable family atmosphere where you've got seniors coming up to you saying, I never hung out with any players outside of the baseball field in my time here. And that's all we do is hang out together on the field, in the gym, in the classroom, and off the field on the weekend. So that manifestation of culture that we talked about early on in August, that we're gonna set the ground rules and the guardrails and the like, and it's up to you guys. It's going to manifest out of you guys. It is truly manifesting itself, and guys are all in. Guys are buying in, and I think it's starting to leak out. I think people are starting to understand what it is that we're trying to do. You know, the best type of advertising is word of mouth, right? I've got 67 guys here from a varsity and a developmental program that can attest to what it is that we're doing and whether or not we're holding true to everything that we've said. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to get calls now for guys that are potential transfers. And so, you know, why are they calling us? I don't know. Maybe it's because they've heard good things. At least that's the hope. So I believe it's just a really good, easy situation to kind of come into. If you want to try to play, you know, high-level college baseball, that is our goal. And like I said, year 0, we're laying the groundwork. Year 1 next year, it'll be a full recruiting class under, you know, I envision it, and then we'll hit the ground running then. But hopefully we're playing a lot of winning baseball next spring.
Well, I want to let parents and student athletes know Coach Rojas is very active on social media. You can make sure, you know, even in the baseball blue book, make sure, you know, A, create your free profile, but B, go take a look at Hastings College, find out all of the coaches, get a look at the schedule, be able to go watch a few games, maybe even watch a few practices. But, you know, if you have an interest in the Hastings College program, A, you can send a direct message, and oh, by the way, he can send a direct message right back to you with regard to recruiting and obviously explaining what the program is all about. You won't find a more passionate baseball human that walks the face of the earth than Coach Rojas. And I really believe in my heart of hearts, you know, the NAIA level as well as the JUCO level are exploding at such a rate that, you know, this is not a NCAA, NAIA. It's about college baseball collectively getting better each and every day. And Coach Rojas doing his part at Hastings College. Victor, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's very, very busy. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and best of luck in the 2026 season at Hastings.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your beautiful family.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice.